and welcome back. If this is your first time, I hope you'll stay. Espero que te quedes. Now, I'm hoping that this video will not only benefit my two students that are in this boat, but anyone else who find themselves in the same situation. Okay, so you have a great level of Spanish already, but you have not really studied Spanish formally at school. But still, you would like to take the GCSE or the A-level exam. What do you do? Well, there are a couple of things you need to consider, especially if you're in the UK. So in England, specifically, we normally teach around Castellano, so Spanish from Spain. And you will note that when you're talking about grammar, at least, and vocabulary, it differs quite a bit to Spanish from some Latin American countries. So you would have to really look and really study what the differences are. Grammatically, the differences are not so vast that it would be impossible for you to get, because there are only a few things, such as the usted and the vosotros differences, the pronunciation of the S's and the C's, the V's and the B's, things like that that you really can get around if you stop and study. Okay, so we all know we're not coming from the same point of departure, if you like. So our issues are probably going to be a little bit different. The first thing we have to consider is that if you're coming from a Latin American country, the next point I think you ought to think about is that these exams in the UK are designed for non-native speakers. So it's not really about how fluent you are. It's using the vocabulary that has been given to you and using the correct structures and following a format. So you might think, oh, well, I'm really fluent already, but perhaps the vocabulary that you're using is perhaps not as formal as it ought to be, or is not as appropriate. So we need to make sure that we note that difference. It's not the same having spoken a language all of your life, never seen it on paper, so perhaps you don't know how to spell certain things. Even though Spanish is quite easy when it comes to spelling, there are some things that are still confusing. So get yourself familiarized with reading things on paper, because a lot of times we find, especially with the young kids, that they speak the language well, but perhaps they don't read. So they have no knowledge of grammar, spellings, writing structures, and so this is what GCSE and A-level Spanish looks at. It is actually for non-native speakers, so you would need to have a little look at it to see what it's asking of you. It's not really always testing fluency. It is testing that in the speaking, but the different areas that you need to make sure that you can handle. Okay. Now, the next point I always say to all my students, I say this to everyone because I think it's very, very important, okay? It doesn't matter if you have a good level of Spanish already. If you don't have that genuine interest and passion, especially at A level, it's not going to work out for you. Because whether or not you're native or you're just doing it as a second language, it does require quite a lot of time and attention. And if you're just doing it just because you think you know Spanish and you don't have to put any work in, you're sadly mistaken, because you will have to put the work in. So the interest has to be there. Regardless of the fact that you do have previous knowledge of the language, it does require quite a lot of work, which is something you will really need to bear in mind, okay? So the fantastic thing though about doing especially A level. And I'm focusing more on A level because I think if you have a good level of Spanish already, GCSE shouldn't really be that hard. It's really just revising the structures and making sure that you have a good understanding and you can handle manipulating verbs quite well, learning the vocab, connectives and so on, and that you are skilled at answering what they're requiring of you. So paying attention to what they're asking, so it's not just about talking in Spanish for the exam, it's not really that. So having a good understanding of what is required of you, I think that's key. So okay, going back to A level, which I think is our main focus. So at A level, obviously the groups are very, very small, and that's going to work in your favor, because it does mean that if you're walking in and you're not quite sure, you do have your teachers there to sort of navigate through this with you, and so you're quite well supported, and so you will have that guide where you need to go and how you need to get there. And it's up to you also to say, you know, Miss or Sir, you know, I'm not quite sure, I'm a bit lost. Just communicate. And I always emphasize this a lot. That communication is key. Okay, so take your time and make the most of the time that you have with your teacher or your teachers at A level, and really think about how you're going to get to where you need to get to, how you're going to get the best mark, what you need to do, where you need to focus. Because even though you might be a native speaker, that is not enough. As I've mentioned, you need to take the relevant steps to make sure that you're getting top marks and you're passing this with ease. Okay? Right. Okay. Right. The next point is this. Just because someone might be a native Spanish speaker, it doesn't guarantee them the best mark. In fact, I've had students who were native in the past with other students who were not, and they're not the ones who always get the top marks. Why? Because I feel as though sometimes you relax because you think you have that upper hand, and that alone will not get you through the exam. So if I'm working constantly being a non-native speaker, and I'm putting the work in, and I know exactly what I'm supposed to be aiming for, and I'm putting the work in every day, obviously I have more of a possibility of getting top marks. So being native is not enough to get you through. It's practice, 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 and knowing really what they're looking for in these exams. Okay, again, you have to liaise with your teacher that working together will really pay off. Okay, it really will. One of the things that you do have on your side is the fact that you have a fantastic accent, of course, and us as poor foreign speakers, we're always a little bit nervous about that, because, you know, when the native speaking class, we do feel quite intimidated. We feel intimidated because you think, oh my gosh, they sound so Spanish, and I don't. But great pronunciation alone will not get you through it. So though that is a good thing, remember that it's just a point, okay, not all the points. Okay. One thing that I've noticed a lot is that when it comes to writing, native students, especially the younger ones, tend to need a lot more support because they're just not that used to writing in Spanish. So you need to really spend a good amount of time going over grammar and doing lots of writing exercises, and those writing exercises obviously need to be checked by your teachers to make sure that you are doing what is expected of you and that the writing style fits in with what your examining board is looking for. Okay, so this next point I think is very, very valid, and it's the point of pressure, because as soon as you walk in, everyone recognizes you and they look at you as the the person, you know. So that's a lot of pressure to think, oh, okay, everyone thinks I'm a native and that I should know everything. That is a lot to deal with, because sometimes just from taking that, just from wearing that tag, you know, it's a negative point for us, because we don't always know it all, or you don't always know it all, really, and that expectation from teachers and students sometimes can be a bit daunting. Be aware of that. Be honest. Have this open conversation, you know, say, guys, I mean, in class you can say, you know, look, we're all here to learn, and if I knew everything, I wouldn't need to be here. So, you know, take it easy and just with a bit of humility. It's all okay. But yeah, it can be a bit stressful knowing that everyone expects you to get it right all the time. But try and manage that by telling yourself that, you know, at the end of the day, you didn't do all your studies in this language. So, okay. So a lot of your classmates might be thinking you have an unfair advantage, which is not always the case. So, okay, make the most of the fact that you do have some strong areas, such as the speaking and the listening. That's where you might focus on picking up most of your points. Now, you need to know where you're lacking, where your strengths are, so that you will come out on top. This is just strategy, okay? It's planning, knowing your weaknesses, knowing your strengths, organizing yourself, and so that you'll be okay at the end of the day. Okay. The next point is this. You have to remember that these exams in MFL, they're quite prescriptive. So I've seen the frustration with some of my students where they've said, you know, I know all this stuff. Why do I need to do this? I already speak Spanish. But we all know that in an exam, it's about following rules, really, grammatical rules, following structures. And even though your teacher knows that you have a good level, that's not who you're trying to impress. You are trying to pass the exam with someone who perhaps doesn't know you at all. Okay, so there you go. Another valid point is being too colloquial. A lot of the Spanish that we speak tend to be picked up from familiar surroundings or friends or from series, or, you know, just the way you speak English. But just as it would be for me if I was writing a paper in English, or I was in a formal setting, I would need to make sure I omit, okay, certain words, certain phrases, because they're just de la calle, okay? No son nada formales, so I cannot always put in these ways of expressing myself in an exam setting. And so you have to be aware of expressions that are too colloquial and perhaps too informal, because at the end of the day, this is an exam, so we have to be aware of that. Okay, right. Moving on to one of the points that you'll need to be aware of, especially when you're speaking. We always tell our students that when you answer a question, you always need to give your opinions and give reasons why. Okay, so it's not just enough, just because I know you're fluent, for you to give a really short answer and that's it because your accent sounds good. Okay, you give your answer, you back it up with a valid point. This is something that you need to do to make sure that you are following what is expected of you in a speaking exam. Okay, so know what they expect of you when you're given the photo cards, what they're expecting of you if they ask you a simple question. Okay, how many sentences do you need to reply with, what words do you need to use to connect ideas, and so on. Okay, it's just knowing your stuff, basically. Okay, again, moving on to text analysis. Okay, so if you have to read a text and analyze and take information out, would you know how to do that? Again, this is training. Someone would have had to show you how to do that. And the only way you do that is going to class and having that time with your teacher to show you and to have practice. Okay, so it is necessary, I think, before you jump into an exam to have a teacher, have a tutor or a tutor guide you through the exam process and let you know what you need to be prepared. The exam will be as easy or as hard for you depending on how much you knew beforehand when it comes to reading, writing, and so on. Reading and writing, really, because speaking and listening, you will have that down, I'm sure. So I think it's just going in with the idea that you do need to spend some time with a teacher or a tutor to go over the type of exam that it is, have lots of practice runs, do lots of past papers. Okay, it's not just about fluency, it's about your ability to analyze a text, your ability to manipulate verbs, different grammatical structures, your ability to read, and for you to just brush up on the skills that perhaps you're not as familiar with, to brush up on those skills that are new to you, those areas that you haven't seen before, that you haven't had that much experience with, and again, communicate with your teacher. Okay, you need to sit down with someone who knows, even find someone who has done the exam before and pick their brain a little bit about it. Okay, find out what they found difficult, and spend time in those areas, and maybe the part they found difficult for you won't be that difficult. So I think it's just being prepared. Go through past papers, there are lots online. Speak to your teacher, have that sit down time with them. If your center has, if your school has a Spanish teaching assistant, that person as well might be able to help you, especially with the speaking, because as I said, it's following a structure. So just having a mock speaking with the Spanish assistant, if your teacher is not available, that probably would be helpful for you. But yes, it's just knowing what you're doing and making the most of it and just being well prepared, I think, is the best advice. Okay, being native does not guarantee you the top marks, but you can get the top marks if you are organized. Okay, so be organized, revise what you need to revise, know your strengths, walk in well armed, and you will do just marvelously well. Okay, and so with that, I'm going to leave you. I hope that you walked away with something useful from today's video, and let me know how you get on and what you're doing at the moment in Spanish. Okay, I'm going to leave you. Adios. And please don't forget to subscribe and share the videos on this channel. Okay, adios chicos, adios.